Jodie Brown, welcome to the Workplay Podcast.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. We're going to dive into all things social, but I feel like we're going to get even deeper than that because I think social is one of those things that it's almost like a buzzword, social media marketing. It's like, what does that even mean? And we have a lot of tangible things that we're going to dive into. So I think it's going to be such a treat. But first, can you just introduce yourself, who you are, what your business is, and how long you've been in business?
Yeah, so I'm actually coming up on 5 years in my online business in a couple days here. In a past life, I feel like I was a hairstylist for 15 years. I got into the industry really young. My mom was a salon owner. I finished hair school at 17. I was an independent hairstylist before I kind of branched in. And that's actually what led me to where my business is now. So essentially, I got into the education space online, teaching other hairstylists how to market their business and build a brand on Instagram because I've been able to do so in my own business. And it's funny, like when you said it goes so much deeper than social, I've always felt this way. So even at the beginning, that was like my point of difference. It's not just about creating content for Instagram, it's about building your brand and building your reputation through social media. And so while I was building this, I was launching my programs for stylists, I was building my own brand, I was speaking, I was doing all these things in the beauty industry. I started to have my peers approach me really early on. So I want to say it was still in 2020, maybe the beginning of 2021, when I started working with fellow educators and online business owners to create their content and to help them in their launch strategy and creating really strong messaging for their programs and all of those things that we need to do in order to build success and build reputation online. And that is kind of what grew into Align Creative Co., which is the business that I have today. I also host retreats in Europe predominantly. We're coming up on our third in Italy. We've hosted in Spain before, and those are really brand building, deep dive messaging, transformational retreats as well. So that is what my business looks like today, and that's kind of how I got into it.
I love it. And what do you think you were doing that was so different at the time? Had people coming to you like, how are you doing this? Like, what do you think was your white space that you were operating in?
I think what it was is that I transitioned fully. So I wasn't trying to build a business on top of my behind the chair business. Long story short, I went to a class like 2 weeks before the shutdown and I just had this like aha moment that other people were struggling. So this class was not about social media. In fact, it was very far from it. But someone asked a question and then all of these other stylists were like, oh, like we hate it. It's such a burden almost. And I remember sitting there being like, can't relate. Like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to my career. And so when I got into it, I almost treated it like I was retraining in a way. I took training on how to become a social media manager. I took on clients for social media management as well as one-to-one mentorship. And so I really went all in on marketing. And it was kind of a little bit meta because I was marketing and working as a marketer. And so I think it was really just the immersion that allowed me to carve out something really special and unique because I was a practitioner as well as a mentor. And I wasn't just teaching what worked for me, because I think in a lot of marketing, that's really what it is, right? It's like we do something, it works, and then we go to teach it. And I really wanted to get a little bit deeper than that. So I wanted to make sure things were repeatable. And I actually took on one-to-one clients for service and mentorship before I ever launched a group program. So I think that's really what it was that set me apart, is approaching it as I'm retraining to be a marketer. And I invested really heavily into the skill set. Like I learned how to be a copywriter and I wrote copy for other online business owners. And so I think that's the thing. And it worked. It was working for me and my peers took notice.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think what's important to note here is using social as a medium. And I almost feel like people put so much pressure on social to like do the thing. I call it like the golden ticket. Like they're looking for something to just give them the success. Whereas if you're just looking at it, it's just a way to facilitate, like you said, brand or reputation.
Yes.
You then switch your focus from social media to then brand. How do I build my brand? And then how do I build my reputation? reputation. It just, then you get to use the features, I think, of
Exactly.
social to your advantage. But I think so many people skip over this part. What was really interesting to me when we kind of connected on this topic was this idea of reputation online. So, what do you mean by building your reputation online, and how do you even go about doing that?
Okay, so first of all, I agree with you so strongly in the sense that people just kind of get, and I think this is why people are so overwhelmed and so stressed out when it comes to social media, because they're almost measuring by Meta's metrics, not the metrics that matter to your business. And so when I talk about building reputation, it comes down to a couple things. Number one, repetition equals reputation. And I will repeat this over and over again to my clients because I think naturally they're always like, oh, but I've said this before. And it's almost at the point where it's like, if you're not sick of what you're saying, you are not saying it enough. And people probably have no idea what you do. That's part of it. And the other piece to reputation is I like to think about what you do on social media a little bit differently because the hub, in the same way that your website is the hub, right? Think about how we connect now. Even you and I, it's like we didn't meet necessarily. I do think I started following you on social first, but we connected outside of that. But then it's like the conversation is taken to Instagram, right? And I think it's almost a really good way to build that trust because of the fact that when you come onto my page or when you connect with someone at an event, or even if someone refers you, right? So say someone's like, you should check out Workplay, they're amazing. They're going to go to your website. They're going to go to your social media. They're not just going to immediately be like, okay, send me the checkout link. Like they're going to look at what you've got going on and your brand first. Even things like collaboration. Social media to me, it's not just about visibility. Yes, that's a beautiful piece that we can leverage for sure. But also it's about making sure that whenever you have any other visibility opportunity, like you're listening to this podcast or you see someone on stage, chances are the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go try and find them on Instagram, right? And so that's where I think we have a lot of power in terms of building that brand and in terms of building that reputation.
I literally could not agree more. I also feel like it's this compounding effect. Like the more that you're on it intentionally, the more it's going to compound on itself. When you were talking, it reminds me of it's like you're meeting someone outside of your house, right? And they see you and they like your energy. And then, like, maybe you invite them into your house and the house is a mess, okay? They're like, oh, wait, this is not in line with the person that I met or who I thought you were. I just think that these sorts of platforms that are so visual and you have such a way where you can connect with people on them. If it's not up to par with who you are, then it's going to fall flat to people. And I think that that's a really important conversation to have because how people are perceiving you is so important to your business. And like you said, the opportunities that you get, the collaborations, like what are you putting on there? Because people are looking, people are watching.
100%. It's so hilarious that you use that analogy too. That is so perfect because when I first started, I remember, when you first start something and you just remember these random details, the first video that was in my first ever digital course that I created literally talked about like how you show up online matters in the same sense that like if you invite someone into your salon and there's hair all over the floor and everything's a mess and it's all over the place, all of that trust that you built online or all of that is going to just fade away, right? And I think that's such a good example. If you meet someone and then you lose trust along the journey, even subconsciously, because a lot of the time with visuals, it is subconscious, right? Like people aren't saying, oh, I'm hiring this person because their visuals are so fierce. Like maybe sometimes there's that, but a lot of the time it's like they take care in how they present their business subconsciously. That feels like they're going to take care of me. And I think that is like so underrated, especially I think it's very trendy right now to be like visuals don't matter and people want messy. But do they? Like when it comes to actually hiring someone, maybe it's not as important to have a perfect checkerboard grid anymore. Like, yes, we can incorporate a little bit more of that real life, but at the end of the day, it's a trust factor. And even like with what I do and knowing that it's subconscious, I do look at that kind of stuff because again, it's that if they take care to show up in a way that is building that trust, I know that the back end of their business is more likely to be well set up and they are more likely to have that expertise I'm looking for.
You know what's so funny is I kind of think this is my prediction is that the aesthetic heavy Instagram and content will cycle through back around because so many people are going to be doing that like messy kind of look. And yes, you can include aesthetics into that look, right? But I think it is all a game of how can you stand out and how can you be the first to stand out. And right now you have such an opportunity to incorporate some of, that trending stuff, but then can you make it aesthetically heavy because there's psychology behind all of that, right? In attracting who you want to attract. I just got off of a meeting right before this podcast recording and it's for a different brand and we're going all in on aesthetics because everyone else has pulled out of that. And the cool thing about aesthetics is that you can create whatever you want. Like you can manufacture whatever you want. And I think that's the really cool thing. Whereas, like, if you're not really caring, you kind of leave that up to the person that is perceiving you. But either way, you're going to be perceived. It's like
one of my favorite phrases is zig where others zag. It's like the classic marketing quote. And I think you're so right. And I also think too that if we like use our critical thinking hats and we look at, okay, like we don't need aesthetics. If you look at these so-called authentic accounts that are doing really well, that are showing up in their behind the scenes and all of that kind of stuff, it's well lit. It's not actually messy. Yes, there's a rawness and an authenticity to it. Like maybe you're seeing someone at their home, but like the visuals are still good quality. The audio is still good quality. The lighting is good. And I think people have this thing in their heads. And I remember struggling with this because the whole authenticity conversation, I think it's just being real and being consistent. That doesn't mean not every person is like hanging out in their pajamas all day. And to me, I feel most at home when I'm like in the villa in Italy, like hosting our retreats. I'm like, yes, this is where I'm meant to be. And I think that sometimes we get this projection of what authenticity means. And I don't think it's the same for everyone. And so that's always something like when I talk to my clients when we're planning out like their strategies, it's like, yes, you want to infuse that storytelling. You want to infuse that realness of who you are, because that's what's going to actually build that trust, not necessarily being like, hey, I'm doing dishes. We don't owe our audiences complete transparency on every part of our days. It's just showing up and being real and being consistent with who you are. I think that's what the true authenticity is. And building a brand doesn't have to be at odds with that. I think they can work really well together.
I totally agree. And like this idea of creating art with your marketing, again, it's like no one's doing it. I mean, big brands still do it because they know it works. And I always use that example. It's like, look at what they're doing. They're doing it because it's still working. And there's such a white space to stand out for sure. Okay, we've got this curated brand. We know that aesthetics matter to some degree. When you say repetition equals reputation, what do you mean in regards to that, especially when it comes to the visuals on platforms like social media?
So for me, when I say that, it's all about your messaging. And the beautiful thing about visuals is that is how it is going to quickly be communicated, right? I can't remember the statistic, but I think it's something like 50,000 times faster. Like your brain perceives visual information that much faster. So it's very much about the messaging. I think that is at the core of it, right? And when it comes to your visuals, that should kind of stack and build that, right? Even if you think of the brand that's coming to mind for me is Gucci, because I'm like wearing the color that's in all their emails right now. It's like you can feel it through their visuals, right? Before you read that first line of copy, but then you do read that first line of copy. So it all needs to stack on top of each other and it all needs to make sense. And so when it comes to building reputation, there's two parts of this. Number one, it's being willing to be repetitive. It's not about saying 100 different things. It's about saying one thing 100 different ways when it comes to marketing. That is vital. We need to be consistent. Otherwise, you'll never build reputation in anything if you're saying it once and hoping everyone sees it. And then the other piece is throughout the client journey. If someone goes to your Instagram and then they go to your website and then they go to all of these other touch points, having both visual consistency and consistency in your messaging is vital when it comes to the reputation building and that trust building thing, because that's what it's about. Reputation equals trust, right?
100%. So when you say one thing 100 different ways, how do you know what that one thing should be? Like, how do you go about deciding what that North Star is?
I love that. So I start with, for my clients, it's a lot of it's educators, right? And they're leaders, educators, leaders, speakers, like authors, like all of these different things. It's what is the change that you want to see in your industry? Because the thing that I think is really consistent amongst all the people I work with is they started their businesses because they were not satisfied with the status quo. And I feel like that's something I even get from Workplay. It's like you guys rewrote the way that branding imagery was done because there was a gap and there was a need for it, right? And so that's where I always like to start. Like, what is that change that you want to see? What is that ripple effect that you want to create? And then how is your work going about creating that? Making that the forefront. Like I talk about too, building your brand around your offers. So there's often this disconnect I find where people are like thinking of their brand and they're thinking of their offers as two different things. And to me, it's like, no, your offers are the way that you bring forth that change and the way that you solve those problems for your audience and the way that you are actually creating the impact that your brand wants to have. And so I think they play together, they go hand in hand, and that's going to form the basis of our messaging, right? That's where we're going to get that one thing or that ripple effect that we want to be known for. And I say one thing 100 different ways. It's usually like five things, five core messages that you really want to bring forth. One of my big things is repetition equals reputation. Like you need to stand on it and you need to speak on it. And the other thing is all of the social content you create, all of the emails you write, all of the offers that you create are never going to have the success that they could have if you focused on that foundational brand. And that is like the hill I will die on. So if you think about what is the hill you will die on when it comes to your industry and what your work is there to do, I think that's a really good place to start.
I agree. I'm a branding girly as well. I 100% agree. The brand is the umbrella or the foundation, however you want to say it, to the overall, honestly, decisions of every single thing. Training team or onboarding or certifying or whatever it is, the brand always comes through. It's like you have to have a deep understanding of the brand. Whenever I see Workplay members come through our process and they're creating visuals, they've so tightly connected themselves to the company. And I like to look at companies like entities, like their own thing. Even if you have a lifestyle brand, you still need to detach a little bit. Like you need to create a character at which is going to facilitate the company if you are a lifestyle brand. What are the answers to these questions from the entity's point of view? I really think that you have to have separation. You have to play into a certain character in a way in order to have a really polarizing, successful brand that breaks the status quo.
I love that. This is interesting because I feel like a lot of my people are personal brands and they come to me because of that. And I think there's a little bit of like harm in the phrase, you are your brand, because of like what you just said. And I do think that there's like, whenever we are so connected, even personal brands, there's almost this expectation to be wildly transparent and share every detail of your life and all of these things. And I actually think that that can be a disservice. So I would agree with you to an extent where a lot of my people as educators, they are personal brands, right? Like it's not you 100%. You know what I mean? Like, yes, you are the person behind the brand, but there are pieces of your life that don't affect your customers. And when we're sharing our stories, it's like we are sharing our stories so that our people can see themselves. It's not actually about us. And I think that's where the conversation entity, that's a good way of putting it. Like I've never really thought of it in that term when it comes to a personal brand, but I can see the validity of that. And I do think it's important to have a bit of separation. Again, the authenticity conversation, I just see it so much right now and see it with so many of my clients. And we have to realize that you can have both. Being strategic with your brand and creating a strategy and a life of its own doesn't mean that you're not being authentic. It means you're being a smart business person. And that's how you're going to have the impact that's important to you, the person, right? The business has to have what it needs to be successful for you, the person, to have the impact that you want to have. And so I think it's important to have that in the back of your mind because too much connection holds people back. And so I would agree with what you said.
I almost think it's just easier too. You only have to focus on these things about you in this brand that can come to life. And it's so much easier to think about it instead of being like, oh, well, this person did this and I should go and share this. And also from a visual standpoint, you get really clear on what that should look like for the brand. I honestly feel like celebrities have been doing this for a really long time, and the world has kind of been a little more democratized in terms of attention when it comes to celebrity brands versus like influencer brands, even personal brands in general in the business online space. Like I said before, I feel like it's all cycles. I think the next cycle of this internet world that we're in is a very clear and defined brand is just going to explode because everyone is everywhere right now.
I agree. And I think that the ways that we can bring our personal connection to our brands, I'm fully in agreement that your brand needs to be strategic. It needs to be well defined. You need to focus on what's in it for your people, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much someone likes you. However, it doesn't matter how much someone trusts you or likes you if they don't think that you can help them with what they want help with, right? It can be the best chocolate bar in the world, but if I don't like chocolate, I'm not buying it. So I think that's something we really need to think about that gets lost in the sauce a little bit when it comes to this influencer approach to marketing. If you actually look at successful influencers, they're all niche in their own way. They all are solving a problem. If Kim Kardashian could make as much money as she does just being herself and showing up on Instagram, she wouldn't have started all of these separate brands, right? So I think we really need to think about that when it comes to being business people, because sometimes you are your brand. It's more like motivational advice and it feels good to hear, but is it actually serving you? And I think that's what's really important. I was actually just watching something about Beyonce, how she's struggling to like sell tickets. Beyonce has the strongest personal brand in the world, but if her audience doesn't like her new album, they're not going to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go see the show, right? So I think that's what it comes down to when we have our brands and when we have our personal brands, even that it's about the customer, it's about our client, it's about the person that we're helping. And if they can't see themselves in your story, if they can't see themselves and aspire and get really clear on what you do, they're going to move on. And that's just the truth.
Yeah. And I love how you brought up Beyonce because as you were talking, I'm like, I'm a big Swiftie. Not like crazy, but like I respect what Taylor Swift has done. And I just noticed that every single album that she puts out is a different storyline. Even within the songs and the sound and everything like that, it's a cohesive storyline. And it's almost like, how do you create that within your own brand? Like if there's Swifties listening, you will understand what I'm saying. Her latest album, The Tortured Poets Department, very black and white, very moody. And like that was the sound. And it's like she's not going to put a song from Lover because that is very upbeat and like it's a different cohesion and it works when it's all packaged really beautifully together. I always tell people with their visuals, especially on a quarterly basis, when you're looking at it through the visual lens, how do you create this body of work that's super cohesive so instantly people get it? Like you were saying with Gucci, it's like the red is like something that they keep hitting over the head with in their emails and their social and their product lines. So you associate these feelings and color and all of that branding with them. It's like, how are you recognizable? How are people perceiving you? It's really deep work, but once you figure it out, it's like, oh, you have such a North Star. But it has to go a little deeper, I think.
I totally agree. And every time I open an email from Gucci, I'm instantly transported back to Rome because that's where I made the purchase. That's when I started getting the emails when I was there. And so every time I get that email, I get that feeling and I get that reminder of that trip. And I think that's an underrated part of branding. It's not just how we want people to feel about us, it's also how we want them to feel about themselves. I think that's a really, really big piece. And whether you're a Swiftie or not, like you said, with those albums is a masterclass in product branding. It really is.
I love it. And I think the more you can pull inspiration, it's like, no one's really doing that right now. Okay. I want to go back to something you said earlier, measuring by your own standards versus Meta's standards. I want to dive into that because I think there is a lot of misplacing where the KPI actually is. And I think it goes back around to this idea of self-awareness. Like, why am I even doing what I'm doing? What's going on one here. I know from experience, for example, this podcast, our metrics are not what you would think success metrics should be for a podcast. And so I think just like honestly understanding where your emphasis is on these metrics can be a huge game changer. So I would love to know your take on that and how you figure that out with your own clients.
I think about this in three different ways. When I say content too, a lot of the time our agency creates social content, right? We create emails and stuff too, but predominantly it's social content. But when I talk about this, I think it applies across all types of content, regardless of where or what you're creating. Essentially, there's three functions that I like to think about. One is visibility. The second, and so that would be when you're creating awareness. This is when people are finding you and they're seeing you for the first time. And I think that's where a lot of people on social media stop. That's the be all end all, the only goal. And I think that's a little bit misplaced because of the way that we consume. The second piece is nurture. So that's building that relationship. And a lot of the time, when we have visibility outside of social media, people are coming to us already kind of aware. So they want to dive deep into what makes us unique. What are we about? What is our brand? What is our reputation solid in? And then the third one is obviously conversion. So that's like, how can we move them from a part of our audience and liking what we do to actually taking the next step and purchasing and working with us? Because someone can read, and this is something where a lot of educators particularly are not wanting to be quote unquote salesy. They're like, oh, I don't want to sell anything on my social media because I just want to help people. But it's like someone can read 1,000 Instagram posts and it's never going to help them even 1,000th as much as actually working with you and investing in themselves and doing the thing, right? So I think those are kind of the three focuses. With visibility, I always will optimize as much as possible for our clients, right? That is the goal. Obviously, if we're putting time and energy into creating content, we want as many people as possible to see it, of the right people. Viral content, a lot of the time, unless you're a brand that's like really broad, it's not as helpful as people think it is. I've gone viral and there's been almost no effect on my business other than people making fun of my eyeliner, or like once you get out of your zone, it's like people are just making mean comments is honestly the truth. And so I like to focus that on like a third of the strategy, more so though on nurture. Like even last week, I had a post that reached 50,000 people. And again, it like didn't really move the needle much. I had another post that got like maybe 30 likes and I got 3 DMs about my program. That's something we need to think about when it comes to our social content. The content that's designed for visibility, sure, we can measure that by views and, by shares, by engagement. But people will create sales content or nurture content and they'll measure it by the same metrics. And then oftentimes they'll be like, oh, well, it's not working. So then they'll stop creating the content that's actually making them money because it's not getting the right vanity metrics according to what they're told they should be shooting for. So that's what I mean by measure your visibility content by reach. Sure. Measure your nurture content by conversation. Is it building your reputation? A lot of the time it'll be things like my clients will get invited to speak at events or they'll get invited on podcasts because they're showing their expertise so heavily. And then the third is sales. Are you hitting your business goals? This can be on social, this can be in emails, this can be your podcast, like whatever that looks like. So for podcasting, I like to think of it as a really solid nurture sequence. Yes, you can have that awareness. Like sometimes people will find you, it's more rare. A lot of the time, if people are listening to your podcast, they'll already be familiar with you or what you do. And so I love to send people there almost as like a binge what I do. This is where you get that really deep understanding of my beliefs, my approach, the way that I do things differently in my business. And so often we'll get like, oh, I binged your podcast. How can we work together? Or how can we do this? So I think that's kind of the measure when it comes to nurture content, not so much the mega viral downloads or anything like that.
I'm so happy you're talking about this because from my perspective, I've always seen social as more nurture. I build social presences for some of the brands that I own with the already assumption that they know who the brand is or they need just a really quick refresher. And sure, that can be done like in highlights or a pinned post, but like I am already assuming that you know the brand, right? And it optimizes the profile for conversion when you have that almost assumption. And so you're just nurturing them based off of, some of your key pillars or what you do or things like that. And whenever I'm thinking about what to post on social, I'm constantly thinking about stepping into someone's shoes. Like, how would they consume this with having an understanding of the brand and understanding of the pain point that we're solving and where we've positioned it? How would they consume this? And it's a really interesting exercise rather than like, okay, well, what is everyone else doing for virality?
Exactly. I honestly, where I always start with people isn't by looking at what's working in the broader scale. I actually just contributed an asset to a bundle, and it was about like the 2025 social pulse and what is working in social right now. I've published like thousands and thousands of pieces of content across dozens of accounts, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that no one is the same. Every account is not the same. Every audience is not the same. So where we can find what's working is we go and we look at our audiences and what we have created, and we figure out, how can I communicate that more deeply? How can I make that more timely for my audience? Has that market become more sophisticated? Do I need to tweak the messaging there? That's what we need to think about, not whatever Instagram influencer posting today.
Totally. You have to be completely obsessed with the consumer. It's like you have to be obsessed with the way that they think, the way that they're perceiving you, the way that they're consuming. It's so weird. I'm like going to make it my mission now on these episodes to really hone in this fact around self awareness, and not just self awareness of yourself, but self awareness of the entity of the business that you have. Like, how is this being communicated throughout all of these platforms? It's going to be completely unique, like the way that you're saying. Okay, our listeners are workplay members or future workplay members. I kind of want you just to give us context on how much visual content you need in order to manage these platforms and make sure that you're creating this sort of brand reputation that you're talking about.
Okay, so the biggest thing for visuals for social that I love so much is, like I said, with all of this being said, we still want to optimize, right? Like, we want to get the most juice out of the squeeze in every way that we can. And so visual hooks are massive. And like we said here, it's like carving out a disruptive zone. We want to have something that's zigging where other people zig. So when you have really solid visuals and when you have disruptive, unique visuals, which I know is something that you really create with your members. Like, I've seen a lot of your members and their stuff does not all look the same, right? It's unique to them. It is tailored to them. And that is what's going to allow you to build reputation. And it's also going to have the dual benefit of stopping a scroll. A really beautiful visual. Instagram is still a very visual platform. And that is what's going to call attention to your message. So, in the same way that we have, like, it's important to focus on hooks, because if you don't have a hook, no one's going to get through what you're saying. They're not going to hear the meat of it if they're not interested and you don't give them that preview. Visuals can act in that same way, and kind of a twofold way. One, it's stopping the scroll. So things that work so well right now in terms of communicating your message are, I love to do like beautiful B-roll sequences with a voiceover, or even like photos with text over top of them so that you're recognizable to your audience. And that is what's going to really help you stand out and apart. The other thing too is bringing in that storytelling vibe. And story isn't just done with text, right? Stories are visual in nature. I don't think I've actually listened, while knowing that it's what I'm listening to, a single song from the Tortured Poets department, but I can picture the branding in my head like that. So that just goes to show the power of visuals. And I can almost predict what that music would be based on the visuals. You know what I mean? I think that there's a lot of power in that. I'm so excited about this collaboration, because when it comes to managing a social presence, probably the hardest thing is like getting those really great visuals sent over, because that's how we can bring your brand to life. 3 posts a week can often be more than enough. The other thing that we need to think about when it comes to social, which is super underrated, is the ability to build email lists and the ability to get people off of social. Organic posts has gotten, I think it's like at this point, 600 or 700 opt-ins from one post.
Wow.
And it is still going. And we posted a month ago. And so that's the power of really strong messaging paired with a really strong brand, paired with an offer people want, paired with really great visuals to hook that attention.
I love how you look at it from a holistic standpoint because it is all of these pieces working together. I really hope after people listen to this podcast or even binge this podcast, you understand this fundamental truth that it is not one thing that is going to get you from point A to point B. It's all of the combination of things working together, which is why we have, power ups in our workplay method so that you can implement at the same time this visual creative direction that is going to stop the scroll, that is going to hook people. But then you can work with an integrated partner like Jodie to bring that to life in another area of your brand. And I just think that that's really, really, really important. And also, the last thing I'll say on this is when you are going through the workplay process, like Jodie's saying, these visual hooks, these disruptive visuals, think about that as you're going through. Our creative directors will only push you as far as you want to be pushed. They're trained like that. So if you're like, whoa, 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 they will pump the brakes on disruptiveness and meet you where you're at because everything is so custom to you and what you're comfortable with. But if you can start to just step outside of your comfort zone so a little bit more each quarter and get to that disruptiveness, it's so important because you have to hook people. You have to stop the scroll. There has to be drama in
Yeah.
some way to get people interested from a
It's
visual lens.
true. Yes, 100%. And it really is a collaborative, holistic thing. Because the last thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned too is when it comes to social, one of the superpowers that is underrated, I think, is the conversational aspect. It's not a monologue, it's something that you can actually gauge what is getting a lot of attention. What are my people really excited about? I had a client who launched an entire new offer because we were creating content. She has like this really cool business model within the beauty industry. When she would talk about the business model she created and why she does things differently, people were so excited about it. And so she created an offer specifically to teach people how to implement this business model, which was not something she'd ever done before. And the success off the bat was insane because it was something that people wanted. And so I think getting these things all working together, and none of these posts, by the way, went viral in the traditional sense. It was just what was resonating with her people. So what I love about your method and what I think is like a really beautiful kind of way that you can bring this together is you can learn from what you're putting out there and you can learn from that and you can like really have a responsive, like up to date, really relevant brand based on what your people want. So I think that's an important thing as well.
I love it. Mic drop. I feel like I could talk to you forever. I want to make sure everyone knows about the power up that you are launching and integrating with the workplay method in general. We're going to leave everything in the show notes, but could you just kind of walk us through exactly what is being integrated with the workplay method?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited about this. So we have 3 tiers. So we have a done with you where we'll get together. It's called the content storyboard session. So essentially we will get together, we'll analyze all of these things that we talked about today. Like what are your goals for your business? What is your audience saying? What's working well in your account? All of these different things. And we'll create content ideas, like really specific content prompts that you would then go and integrate. This is a meeting between you and I. So it's something that I do personally, and we'll go in and create something really incredible that you can then go and implement with your workplay visuals and, with all of the assets that you have. The second tier is one that I love. It's called Content Quarterly. So this is such a cool VIP experience where we will create a quarter's worth of content, 12 weeks worth of content in one session. So we will meet, we'll discuss your business goals, all of the things, and then we will execute that 12 weeks worth of content for you. That's really great for people who want to dip a toe into that support and they want to have the copy written for them, the reels created, all of those different things. So they're not having to worry about execution, but they don't necessarily need that long-term integrative support, essentially. And then the third option is Content Copilot. So that is our monthly retainer. And that is where we get in there, we do a monthly strategy session. So we're constantly updating your messaging. We're able to work with you when it comes to things like launches and it's more having a co-pilot. So if you don't want to hire and train a full-time marketing team member, this is that next best thing. And you're not having to pay the 150K a year for a marketing educated person to be a partner in your business. So that is a really, really beautiful compliment to someone who's got an established offer and they're really looking to max out the results on social.
I love it. We're going to have all the links in the show notes. And when you're on your creative direction calls, of course, as members, you guys will have access to Jodie's call schedule as well. Okay. Thank you so much. This was a treat. Where can everyone find you? Where can they connect other than our power ups?
Definitely through the power ups. You can also find me on Instagram at It's Jodie Brown. And I have a podcast as well where I dive deep on all of my views on marketing and all of the anti-gimmick opinions that I have and host guests on the Visionary Rising podcast as well. So those are the two best places to connect with me.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jodie.
Thank you.